What's up, Internet? Zachamus Prime, aka Zachamus Prime, here with another Transformers review. And today, the figure I want to talk about today is the Transformers Deluxe Earthrise Cliffjumper. And I think that Cliffjumper is actually a pretty damn swell figure. Come on, tripod, agree with me. No, don't agree with me on how good the figure is. Agree with me on where I want it to point. One of the biggest complaints I see about this guy online is that so many people are complaining about, oh, well, he's a deluxe class figure, but he's like a legend-sized figure, and it's like, and people are complaining about they're getting ripped off, and I absolutely don't see it. And I tell people, like, just by looking at it, you can tell that the engineering and design of the figure is much higher than a Legends class figure, and it is. But they're like, it's so short. Well, look. When it comes to the price point of figures, there's four main factors that go into it. First of all, you've got the design and engineering of the figure, which is done by some Hasbro or Takara engineers. You've got the fabrication and testing of the molds that they're actually molding the plastic with, and that's done by their machinists and engineers. You've got the actual plastic that goes into it, the functional material costs of it. That's actually the smallest piece of this whole pie, because plastic has been going up in price lately for a number of reasons, but it's still a pretty damn cheap thing. That's still the cheapest single part of this whole pie. And last, and this is the biggest part, is the assembly. These aren't assembled by machines. These are assembled by hand by some, by some shop in Vietnam or whatnot. And that assembly is the biggest single cost of the figure, because you only need to cut the mold and design the figure once. Once you get it done, you don't need to worry about it anymore. The plastic material costs is, like I mentioned, the smallest piece of the pie. And so this is the one that takes the most time, and it takes that much time on each and every figure that you make. Somebody has to go in and physically put everything together and install the screws and the pins and everything. And the more pieces the figure is made up of, the more time that takes, and so the more that costs. So price point is often defined more by the parts count of the figure than by the size, head height of it. So let's look at some of the other Legends class figures. First of all, I'd like to point out that Cliffjumper is taller than all of these figures. I mean, in terms of head height, I'm not really talking about the pointy little parts that stick out the top of not Power Glide. But second of all, I went through and I counted up the parts that went into this. I'm not counting about the screws and the pins because I didn't really want to track down all of that hardware. But in the actual plastic parts count for these guys, this guy is at 25 pieces, this guy is at 27 pieces, and this guy is at 50 pieces. That's twice as much as Bumblebee. And so, like, that in and of that self, that biggest chunk of the whole pie that goes into the expense of the figure, that's twice as much as this guy, or even almost twice as much as this guy. So that's something to think about and to understand. And of course, I'm including this because this is part of that figure as well. And which brings me into a good segue going into his accessories. So this is his glass cannon. It's apparently a gun that he uses to do something to the chemical composition of metals so that they shatter like glass instead of being rigid like metals. And I've got it turned upside down like this because I actually like putting it in a certain way. You can put it in this way and he can hold it out dead straight. And honestly, I personally don't like that because it's just, I don't know, the whole stiff-armed pointing technique is not very fun to me. I don't think it looks very good. I like to either have it, plug it in on the side of his arm like this, or my preferred method, which is to plug it in underslung on the arm, and then I switch this around so you can still use that like a bipod. And I think it just looks really good like that. So he's got this big old long gun. Of course, it's not about the size, it's about how you use it. One of the things you can use it for is you can separate all of the parts off And it actually turns into 2 separate guns, so he can dual wield his guns and be like throwing out his pew pews and like John Woo through like a doorway. So I think it's fairly versatile. Looks pretty good. And of course, you can store parts. He's got all of your standard peg holes here in his fist, right here on the back of his car, right here on the side of his legs, and then right here on the bottoms of his feet. So he is compatible with all of your disassembly figures. In terms of articulation, his head is on a ball joint. It looks up and down. It's got a hinge that's in here. And if you use that hinge, you can get quite a bit of down on that. Even though he's not really going to be looking down at anybody because he's basically the shortest Autobot. But the ball joint allows for just a tiny bit of up. Head goes tilting the side to side a little bit, and of course full rotation on that ball joint. His arms does a full swivel. Goes out for the tree pose and then some. He's got a bicep swivel that works just fine. 90 degrees of bend that goes forward, and actually 90 degrees of bend that goes backwards. He's got a wrist swivel, which, by the way, tell me when was the last time you saw a Legends class figure with a wrist swivel? Or an ankle tilt, for that matter. He's got a waist joint, which rotates quite well. Interestingly, his waist joint is actually way up high in the middle of his body instead of right down here. Also, due to the design of that joint, and it is a transformation joint as well, he does have a little bit of back flexion, so he can lean back. He can't go forward, but he can limbo. He can limbo like a boss. I mean, he's already short to begin with, but he can also limbo. His legs go forward that much, they go backwards that much, they go out for the full Van Damme. They have got a swivel right here. 90 degrees of bend at the elbow, and no forward and back on that ankle, but, you know, you've got absurd amounts of tiltage on that ankle, so pretty decent amount of articulation, about what you'd expect from a modern Hasbro Takara figure. Also, one thing I want to point out is that this entire figure almost, at least all of the red almost, with the exception of his head and his forearms, all of the red on him is painted. That's why when he goes into vehicle mode, despite this being a clear piece and this being a red piece, they're the same color. It's because they're colored with the same paint. So, and that also, you know, has this kind of like satin finish to it, which adds to the you know, quality feel of it. Like, this is not, it's not a cheap bare plastic, you know, Legends figure. This is a deluxe class figure, and that money's got to go somewhere. A lot of it goes into part count. Also, a lot of it goes into paint apps. So, anyhow, let's get him transformed up. Oh, well, this is another thing that I don't really like about this. This is a big complaint that I see about this guy as well, that I actually pretty much agree with, is I wish that they were able to design some way to keep all of this together. I mean, as a collector and as a guy who, you know, buys Transformers and likes Transformers, this is not an instant turn-off for me. But it is something that I always prefer that they don't do that. But we'll take that off and tuck in that little peg there. We want to take his little flaps and extend those out a bit. We are going to open this up. I like to turn his head around, but I'm not sure that's actually how it's supposed to go. Flip this part up. The arms go around and then come like this. You want to bend this at his little waist flexion like so. Actually, we want to rotate it first and then bend it just like that. So with this in place, you can then kind of start to weasel everything into their final positions. The legs will go up. You got to make sure that this waist section doesn't bend more than 90 degrees, because if you do, you start misaligning things. But you bend this arm all the way around. There's little tabs on the inside of the arms and little slots right here underneath the waist. Those tabs will go into those slots, like so. And then you can plug these into place. They'll kind of plug into each other and then plug into this little hood section here. You can plug these in like so on those tabs. Fold these tires up. This is just going to plug right into both of his hands and then fold up into place. And it tabs in, and there you go. There you have Cliffjumper in his vehicle mode, and he looks like an old Pontiac of some sort, I think. I don't know. I'm not really a car person, so I can't tell you offhand exactly what type of car he turns into. But he does turn into a car, and it's a red car too. There he is, nicely painted Autobot symbol there. Some people complain greatly because this is the Transformers movie scowly type of Autobot symbol instead of the old 80s, 90s G1 symbol that they used in the 80s and 90s. So, but yeah, he has a fair amount of clearance. I mean, not like a huge amount of clearance, but as they say in the machinist industry, clearance is clearance. He has clearance, so everything does roll. And that's pretty much it. You can... He's got one port that is exposed up here, so you can take his one gun, or you can combine all of his guns together and plug it in up top. And that's something. Or you can take this. There was that one scene in that one episode of that one show where he had like a ski mode. He had skis that came out. You can take these and you can plug these in right underneath his wheels. And then this part here opens up because we've only got the two skis. And that will plug in this port, or this one on that port right there. And then these little tiny divots will fit into those hollows right there. Like so. And now he's skiing. His wheels don't roll anymore because he's all lifted straight up. He's skiing. And I mean, it's a gimmick. It's kind of a dumb gimmick, but it's a gimmick. And if you like that sort of gimmick, then you'll like this figure. And if you don't, well then, God bless you. I don't know. This handle does not fit like that. But you know what? Since I usually have it sticking up anyhow, there you go. And this will swivel around on its port, I guess, because that's a round peg and a round hole. So anyway, so that is the Earthrise Cliffjumper. As a deluxe class figure, I think he is worth it. I think he's pretty much par for course for deluxe class figures in the Earthrise line. Yes, he is shorter, but you know what? He's Cliffjumper, damn it. He's supposed to be short. If he was as tall as, you know, your other deluxes, then he would look weird in the whole lineup. By the way, nobody's complaining that Trailbreaker is just so massively huge, even though I guess it's Hoist. Hoist that's in that wave. Hoist is much taller than any of the other deluxes, so. Anyhow, thanks everybody for watching. You guys are fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, you're fantastic. You give the best farts. And I will talk to you later. Everybody stay awesome and be good to each other. See ya.